6:51 here, Big 550 KTRS. Lots to get to with our next guest, St. Louis County Executive Steve Stenger. Mr. Stenger, welcome back to the Big 550 KTRS.
McGraw, thanks for having me. It's great to be on again.
You got it. Tell us what you want to do with these new police minimum standards in St. Louis County.
Well, McGraw, what we are trying to do and what we want to do with this legislation is bring up all of our departments to minimum standards so that we can ensure that our St. Louis County residents have equal access to quality law enforcement. And if I can just say and add to that, we have the majority of our departments in St. Louis County and the municipalities that are doing an excellent job, and the men and women of those departments are going out every day and doing their jobs extraordinarily well. We just have some municipalities where that is where the standards are not up to par with some of our other departments. You know, I can mention a few that are doing a great job. You've got departments like Florissant, like Hazelwood, like Glendale. These are departments, and I'm only mentioning those because, and there are so many to mention, I couldn't mention all of them. Those are departments who are doing it right and who have worked very hard to become accredited.
How is this different than that state legislation that was signed and passed last legislative session?
Well, I think you're referring to SB 5, and there's a 6-year period that the municipalities would have to become accredited by either CALEA standards or by state police chief standards. And that's a 6-year waiting, and we really don't have that kind of time for St. Louis County. Now, we're not requiring certification through this legislation. We are requiring that minimum standards are met. And while we wait that 6-year period, I think this legislation is absolutely necessary to ensure that all of our residents have access to quality law enforcement wherever they travel and wherever they live.
We're starting to hear that some police departments are going away and they're joining this new North County Police Co-op. Are these standards directed at that quote-unquote co-op and organizations like that to maintain minimum standards?
These standards do apply to the co-ops, and there's also a review and analysis provision that is contained within the legislation that allows the county to review those contracts that are entered into by, let's say, 2 or 3 jurisdictions, and they're often called collaboratives, where we see entities contracting in St. Louis County. We want to avoid a situation where a substandard department wants to just perform policing services for a department that may be going by the wayside.
All right.
And we want to avoid a situation where a substandard department takes over another department and it just becomes one larger substandard department.
Steve Stenger with us, St. Louis County Executive. We've had a number of guests on this show bring to our attention this landlord bill that was passed by the county council the other day. They keep reporting that this forces landlords to kick people out of their apartments if they break the law. Is that possible?
Well, let me explain it, and I think you'll understand what that law aims to avoid and to really to improve for all of St. Louis Countyans. The bill, frankly, is targeted at drug houses. And the bill also has a registration component that is going to be online for landlords so that you can register if you're a landlord online. There's no fee. But we need to be able to track and determine who owns properties that are derelict in St. Louis County. Right now we have a situation where we have an occupancy permit process, and that occupancy permit process for decades, and I mean decades, has failed us. And it's failed us to a point that we have dilapidated properties all over St. Louis County. And right now, St. Louis County is providing the services to those dilapidated properties because the landlords, in many cases, are completely unreachable. They've abandoned the property. There's some, in many cases, they're out-of-state landlords that own the properties. And we are stuck with maintaining those properties, and that's all on the taxpayer dime. And I think that landlords in St. Louis County, we welcome them. We want them to be here. That is why this is a registration process that is absolutely free. We want good landlords, and good landlords will not be affected by this bill in any way, shape, or form.
I got 30
If you are a
seconds.
landlord that has a crack house or a drug house on your property, there's going to be an issue there, and we need to know who owns that property so we can stop that behavior right away.
Will a landlord be forced to evict somebody or a couple of people in a residence?
If the person living in that residence is basically running a drug house out of that property, the landlord would be forced to evict that person who's running the drug house.
Steve Stenger.
And I think that is completely reasonable.
Steve Stenger, St. Louis County Executive. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, McGraw. Thank you.
You got 657 KT.